We'll begin. So last week we had a sporadic class, and in that sporadic meditation, I was only able to cover, I think, 2 verses, maybe 3. I had 20 plans, but things happened. And I spoke about 3 verses. And um, I've heard stories of teachers, you can speak the same verse for all of history. You could give a class on the same verse every day, every day, every day, every day. One who's uh, what they call in our tradition a rasika. Rasa means like juice or like flavor, and rasika means like one who's like a connoisseur of this flavor. And really, what they are is a connoisseur of the flavor of love. So when someone is a connoisseur of love and understand it in all its flavors, they understand that actually every part of our bhakti text are saturated with this juice of love. And so then in that way, they're able to speak from love the same thing, the same verse, and they're able to derive fresher and fresher realizations. Right? When we started this whole study together, I mentioned how Gandhi said, when I feel my moments of greatest despair, I look to the Gita and I find a verse that soothes my heart. I find newer and newer meaning every time. I find newer and newer meaning. And I mentioned that this is the difference between something material and something spiritual. Something material can only be chewed so many times, and then it loses its taste and it becomes that ABC gum, right? The already been chewed gum. But something spiritual can be chewed again and again, and it becomes more flavorful. It kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys have watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He gives her like that piece of gum that's like a full meal. And she's like, shit. And she's like, oh my God, onion soup. And of course, like as Vaishnava, not super into onion soup, but then she's like, oh, like whatever the next course is. She's like, green bean casserole. And then she's like, wow, blueberry pie. And it's like everlasting piece of gum. Like that's what we're actually all looking for, is what is it in the world that can give everlasting flavor, everlasting juice for the soul? And we're not finding it. We're trying and we think, oh, well, maybe if I change my circumstance, maybe if I have more money, maybe if I have more sex, maybe if I have this change, maybe I have that, then I'll get more juice. But it's like the same piece of gum. You just change it out, and it's also has a very limited shelf life to it. So in this way, we can just forever study the Bhagavad Gita together. And then once we finish, there's no finish, we just start back from chapter 1, right? So there's only 18 chapters. So when we finish, then we can go on to chapter 19, which is chapter 1 again, and then keep going from there. Okay, so let's jump in. Last time we spoke about verses 11, 12, 13, 14. And this is just so you remember, this after Arjuna surrenders and ask Krishna to be his guru. And so the relationship dynamic has changed, right? Like this happens, I'm equating myself, but one should be fed when hungry. One should only tell if asked, right? So I know a good amount of Ayurveda, and I see people doing unhealthy things all the time. But it's not my job to tell them all the things that they're doing wrong, unless they're hungry and unless they inquire, right? So Krishna kind of like smiling and letting Arjuna go through his ignorance and his kind of emotional bewilderment until this point. And this is actually the beginning of where Krishna gives first instruction. And in one sense, he's giving the most elementary lesson about the difference between the body, mind, and soul. And that's really what this whole section is that we're studying, verse 11 to 30, is Atma Tattva, knowledge about this, right? And for one to find joy, one has to know who they are. That's step one. And even though it seems like such elementary knowledge, especially if we're familiar with some spiritual concepts, it is not a lesson that we live. So we need to hear it over and over again for it to sink in, and we need to do practices that also uncover the truth of the soul, right? It's not enough to just theoretically know, oh, I'm a soul and I'm different from my body and all that, but to actually live in it is a very high level of realization that very few people actually. And so even though it is elementary, it is worth hearing again and again and again. So let's jump in. We read the first 3 verses already, or 11 through 14 actually. Okay, so he's basically telling Arjun, like, you're speaking all these learned words and you're rationalizing in so many ways using philosophy about how you should avoid your duty. But this is not befitting you. This is not befitting you, actually. And then he's going to break down all the philosophical arguments about why his rationalizations don't make sense, which of course is very painful to that from somebody when you rationalizing in all your weak ways about you can't change and why you can't do what's right. And then someone's breaking down your arguments. And then you're cornered and you're left with the truth. And you have to do what's right. Right. So this is kind of where Arjuna is at. So let's start from verse 15. You can read along if you want, or else just listen. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both, certainly eligible for liberation. Okay, so this is similar to verse 14 that we already read. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance is like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. So even though now we had such a nice summer, we know that winter must follow. And just as when we're happy, we wish to stay that way forever, but it's trying to have summer all year round. It is not going to work unless you're in Colombia, where I just was. Then that's nice. So it's very nice to go to places like that. It's very predictable, and practically speaking, the disease due to environment is very low, right? Because not the changing elements all the time that the body has to adjust to. It's the same elements every day. So in that way, the body becomes happy, and you see the people that are very happy. You see the places with very stable climates, the people are very happy because they don't have to come with this factor of nature. But of course, the main suffering that we all experience is the suffering from our own self, from our own mind. So that goes with you, unfortunately, no matter if you're in Colombia or wherever you are. And in my experience, it seems like most people have a more stressful time on vacation than when they're at home. The joy is in the planning. The joy is in the imagining, but not in the thing itself. So, and he's speaking about these kind of things that are happening, like happiness and distress, or like seasons. They're gonna just come and go. And then again in verse 15, he says, "Person who's not disturbed by happiness and distress, and who's steady in both, is certainly eligible for elation." So I think that's a pretty interesting concept, because I think we've mainly reduced a lot of sufferings. Is anybody familiar with the word klesha? Klesha? Okay, this is a word you should all know. Going forward, we're going to speak about it more. I put it in the chat. Klesha. It means suffering. And there's 3 different sources of suffering. Okay, I'll just run through very quickly, or else I'll only get through 2 verses today again, and we'll never go through the whole bit. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's suffering. I'm not going to do the Sanskrit here just to simplify things, but there's basically suffering from the environment. That's one category. So from the elements, etc., from seasons, from natural disasters, etc., the environment. They're suffering from other living entities. So right now, my legs have about 40 mosquito bites. And you don't understand this tiny little thing, how much suffering and anxiety, it can give you. And actually, that little thing is the biggest killer in the world. Is the deadliest animal, is the mosquito, right? It spreads a lot of disease, malaria, kills millions of people a year. This little thing. Or other humans, how annoyed and triggered and how much suffering can come from other humans. So they're living entities, that's category 2. And then the third category is our own mind body. And I've thought about this deeply. I mean, maybe not super deeply, like, all the stages, but I've thought about it a good amount. And that we've largely eliminated suffering from the environment due to technology and how we've advanced and how we have like Whole Foods and AC and heaters and running water and electricity and all these things. It massively, like 90% reduces the possible suffering you could have from your environment. Then other suffering from other people, that one's very easy. It's called impersonalism. And we're good at it. And we have a culture of impersonalism. And then you don't like somebody, you can just cancel them now. You can just be in your insular house. Like, how many of your neighbors know? How many of your next door neighbors do you know, like, deeply? I know like a few of mine, but not deeply. What to speak of all the other thousands of people that live right next to me, and I don't have to deal with them. So I largely have control over that too. Whereas it used to be like village life, and the people who are in your village, they're in your village and they know you, you know them, they're going to see you everywhere. You have to walk everywhere or, be seen everywhere you go. So there's that suffering from other people that we've also greatly reduced. But I've seen that the main one is the suffering from our own bodies and minds. And that we're quite expert at creating that for ourselves. Self-generated suffering. So 80, 90% of disease is self-generated through our choices and poor thinking, not from some inevitable, uncontrollable event, but rather through choices and thoughts and certain suffering we've created. Yeah, there's so much to say there, obviously. But anyways, my point is, in one sense, we've greatly reduced the different categories of suffering, but the suffering for itself has become greater. And I think there's also a lot of people suffering lack of meaning. And that in itself is a certain suffering that takes the form of boredom, takes the form of lethargy, takes the form of inaction, takes the form of meaninglessness, takes the form of apathy. And it's very common for people to feel that. There's like a void that especially has captured our younger generation, like those born in the 90s and later. It's a meaning generation, a meaningless sort of epidemic. And so that's happening. A lot of self-generated suffering. And it is said in the Gita that there's many different types of people. There's different types of people who come to God. The main one is the one who suffers. That's like the large majority, right? Like one who is like inquisitive, or the one who like truly wants to know the truth. Those are rarest. Those are very rare. People who just are truth seekers. They just really want to know. They're dedicating their whole lives to truth. It's very rare. So the point I want to make here is that in one sense, it's easy for spirituality to be an option when we're suffering. And what I found is, of course, that's a great option because Krishna is always an option. But what I found is that this verse is saying being equal, not disturbed by happiness or distress. So you're like, okay, like I'm practicing not being disturbed by stress, but how about practicing not being disturbed by happiness? I find that one is actually more challenging because when everything's going your way, the sense that you're the controller and you're the enjoyer, and that look how things are going my way and how I can control my environment and how this is wonderful. And you forget all about the deep existential position that you're actually in, of being in a temporary body and being in a very awkward position, being in this material world, being covered by ignorance, not knowing what the future holds. And it's harder to have that feeling of needing to take shelter when you feel like you're the one in control because everything's going your way, going well, and I'm happy. So anyways, that's just been one of my reactions. And I think also something I've had to contend with because I have gone through a good amount of suffering and a good amount of and very intense in my life. But I've also had a lot of fortune and a lot of fortune in my life. And I found that, man, how do I stay focused when things are really going my way? How do I stay focused on my spiritual life when things are just really going my way? It takes a different tool set to then just like, God help me, I'm suffering, it's like, it's a different tool set. And at least in my opinion, I feel like for me, it takes a connection to connect when everything is going my way, to be genuinely humble and connected to God when everything's going my way than when I'm just, okay, so this is verse 15. And basically showing that by practicing tolerance of the dualities of this world, you actually happy. And not the flickering kind of happy, but the real kind of happy. The real kind of happy. So it says in this Sanskrit, it says the word dhira actually means one who makes their D, which means intelligence, DHI, that means intelligence, active in Dharma. Okay. And so it is also implying here that one who is swayed by happiness and one who is swayed by stress is not eligible for real joy. Right. And I find that's very true when people have very emotional realities and you see they have very high highs, but those same people have very low lows. It's a nightmare. It's a roller coaster ride. And I found that since being a little bit more serious in my spiritual life and dedicating myself, that instead of thing going on, it's this thing going on. It's not so much dependent on like the wow and like what's happening, but more so my internal state. And so that's the benefit of this practice. What else do I want to say here? The reason why most people approach out of suffering, or how should I rephrase it? The reason why there's not many who approach just to know the truth is because the truth is oftentimes very confronting. And the reason why is because of everything we learned in chapter 1 about avidya and ignorance and all different corollaries of ignorance and how we are covered deeply in that. So if our natural setting is ignorance, truth is the antithesis of ignorance, and which means it's going to naturally confront our conceptions, which are formed by ignorance. Does this make sense? You guys following this? Kind of? Okay. Which means another way to think about it is that the truth does not conform to your conceptions. Even if you're like in woke culture, shockingly, because woke culture always changes. What is woke now will be unwoke in 20 years. What is woke now was not woke 20 years ago. Woke always changes. The modern conception of what is true and what is right is always shifting, but truth with capital T is always steady. And of course, truth is always applied according to circumstance, and there should be the sensitivity to that. But truth with a capital T is steady. Because of that, and we're not steady, and we're informed by ignorance, and we're informed by so many other things, it will naturally be very confronting. And so this is also happening with Arjuna right now. This is happening with Arjuna right now, because his problem was ignorance in chapter 1. And so naturally he's being confronted right now. It is not a comfortable conversation for him. We're hearing it and we're like, wow, Bhagavad Gita is like so nice, and like, you know, so many nice little bits for me to share. But actually it was very confronting to be spoken to like this and to have your ignorance challenged. But now the relationship has changed. Whereas you may kind of enjoy having the same ignorance as one of your friends, and that may be why you're friends in the first place. Hopefully not, but many times we're friends with people who have the flavor of ignorance as we do and enjoy the same flavor of ignorance. And I can admit that too. People who like, you know, boba and who like all the different things that I like, I'm like, okay, we friends, and I get some bubble tea and we can hang. But now Arjuna has opted in to be a disciple. Arjuna has opted in to be a disciple, and that's where we get the word discipline from. And it's not discipline like a reprimand, like kind of sense, but a discipline in this being a real disciple means disciplining your conceptions, right? What are my conceptions? And disciplining because your conceptions are what actually bring you joy. Bad conception brings a bad destiny, right? Is this all right so far? Following? Okay, so verse 16, we can on. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Okay, so basically giving the tattva again, right? The body is temporary, it's obtained, change, subject to decay, and the soul is unchangeable, right? And those who see things as they are will naturally come to this conclusion. Those who are seers of the truth will naturally come to this conclusion. Okay, and so also what this is arguing at is that some people believe that we are Jakriti. Some people believe that all of existence is just material nature and that there is no need for God, right? There's no need for God, but everything has just evolved naturally. The elements of the universe, there's a big bang and all the elements, you know, I studied biology, have all these big theories and whatever, and all these different things. There's so many theories. There's so many theories that when you logically look at them, most of them are very unscientific. How can you say that something came from nothing? Have you ever seen something come from nothing? It goes against the laws that you previously established, that for every action, there's equal opposite reaction, law of conservation of matter. So many laws. They're laws. How is it that this creation was made from nothing? How can nothing suddenly So it's either that everything came from something and that original something had a universal order to it, or everything came from nothing, which means that it's complete chaos, which is one of the leading theories, that everything is random, not everything's chaos. But there's many amazing arguments against that. One is this, and one of my teachers gives this example. So at my house when he was there, you'll get this reference. But let's say you went to a room, and in that room there were hundreds of monkeys. Okay, and you gave all the monkeys typewriters. Now, what is the chance that you leave that room and when you come back, they have all written in iambic pentameter Shakespeare's works? What is the chance? Uh-oh, froze here. I can't see any of you. Hold on. Can someone unmute and say if they can still hear me? Because all of you are frozen suddenly.
You're good to
Yeah.
go. Everything's fine.
Yes, yes.
All of you are frozen for me, unfortunately.
You're good.
Okay, okay. Okay, anyways, so now I just get to pause at all your smiling faces about my monkey. But what is the chance, right? The chance is very, 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 very low. The chance is zero chance. So say you close the door again and you open the door, what is the chance that they have written the entire collective works of all of history? It is very low. It is impossible. Okay, some of you come back now. That's so great. It's so relieving because I was talking to all these frozen faces that are like, and it's kind of weird to talk to that. It's like a little unsettling, makes me like nervous. Not any of you are shady people, but just the frozen faces. It's unsettling to talk to someone if they're like, so the fact that everything I'm saying is making sense and everything that I say after that makes sense and that everything is forming a logical conclusion in your mind, everything that makes sense that comes out of my mouth, chance that everything's happening by chance. Every time there's order, the probability that everything that's happening by chance exponentially goes down. And we see everything's happening by order. So you guys follow that one? Okay. Everything that comes out of my mouth exponentially decreases the chance that everything is happening by chance. It makes sense and you can understand me and it's coherent and it's linear and it takes you somewhere. Right? So again, this is one of the arguments around atheism and around everything being material and the body is just a combination of material elements and all these different things like that. Okay, so then verses 17 through 19, we'll just read them together for sake of time. They're getting at some of the same things here. We can take a deep breath and exhale. So verse 17, that which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, O fight, O descendant of Bharat. Neither he who thinks living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge, for the self is not nor is slain. Okay, so again, this is getting at all different types of points. It's the knowledge of the soul. The soul is indestructible. It's all pervasive, meaning like, where's your soul? Like, point to your soul. I already gave away the answer. I mean, they say that the heart is the seat of the soul, but the soul, in fact, is pervading everything, right? It's the symptom of the soul is consciousness, and consciousness pervading everything, right? It's pervading my entire body. That's why it has life in it. And you can see that I'm an alive person, not a dead person. It's very interesting because the Vedas describe the soul as 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a piece of hair. So it's very small. So the example is given is just as the sun makes up such a small portion of the sky, but illuminates the whole universe, this whole planetary system. So the soul is also so small, yet it illuminates everything. It illuminates the whole body, the whole body mind vehicle. All right, let's read 5 more verses. So we'll make our way through here. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Okay, that's just trippy. Like I mentioned last class, the whole concept of eternal and unlimited is a very weird concept to contemplate. Like, don't think about it too long. There might be some screws that come loose, and I'm not liable. I didn't have you guys sign any waivers before this, so I'm not liable if you start contemplating the whole eternal thing and it starts to get to you, you quit your job, you can't function, you're like, damn, like all eternal, that means all forever backwards and forever forwards. You are in existence. Your body changes, but you have existed. And we have that sort of intuition about that. I remember as a child, like crying once because I thought about how weird it is that we have to die. And I thought about that it just doesn't seem like a proper concept. It doesn't seem like a proper concept because the soul, it just is not natural for the soul. It's not natural for the soul. That's why it's such a intense thing. Death. It's confronting because it's actually unnatural. Okay. Oh, Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, and unborn kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? Right. So he's kind of logically going through all this. Like, if you exist forever, how can one actually be killed? Right? It's actually not possible to kill or be killed. Right? Maybe the body can end. The body inevitably will end, which Krishna already made this point. The body is always changing. The body will end for sure. It's guaranteed. But how can anyone actually be killed? As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So it's very interesting, like the yogis who actually can remember past lives, it's been like that for them. Like, yeah, now I have this type of body, now I have that type of body. It's like you went to the store, now I have this jacket, now I have that jacket, and it's not such a dramatic thing. It's just like the changing of, like, you don't cry when you change your clothes, right? If you did, you'd probably be admitted to like a mental hospital, right? You like change your clothes in the morning and have to shower and like take off your shirt. Like, no, like you're like so upset about it. It's like that would be mentally insane, right? There would be something seriously wrong. And this is how the yogis view us, right? What is this? The body has to be changed, right? It's always changing. Just like I gave the example of the cheesecake. I don't know, anybody like the cheesecake example I gave last week? Okay, some cheesecake fans. So I said that the ingredients for the cheesecake, they're existing, eternally that way. But the cheesecake is only existing for a small amount of time. The ingredients come together and there's cheesecake. And then very soon after, it dissipates again into the ingredients. Right. And that is like the material body. For just a short period of time, the ingredients come together and we have a body, and then it dissipates. So actually, it's such a small piece of time compared to the existence of the soul that this body is put together in, this kind of cheesecake way. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. So he's giving all different examples. The individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. It's actually such a solace, right? That I am me always. I always exist. Nothing can kill me. Right? I'm always existing. In one sense, it's a relief that there's no end. There's no end to my existence, nor will there ever be. What else here? It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. Okay, so this is verse 20 to 25. What else do I want to say? So he is kind of just going deeper here. Krishna is going deeper here. It says, when the body is destroyed, the self accepts another body, like new clothes. And the body may be affected by so many things, but the self is untouched, being in an ontologically different category than the body. Okay, to the extent that you know the nature of the Atma, right? This Atma Tattva with certainty, you will no longer lament. You'll no longer lament. Okay. Let me just read for a second here. Yeah, so anyways, the verse 24, basically what it's saying is it's unchangeable and immovable and eternally the same. The reason we're suffering is because we don't have a fixed identity. The reason we're suffering is because we don't have a fixed identity. So if you think about it, there's like a schism in the mind, and there's like different dualities that we're experiencing within ourselves, different desires, different people we're trying to be, the mother and then the boss and the uncle, the sister, the employee, the artist, the spiritualist, like all these different schisms. And it says the symptom of one who is enlightened is that their identity is one. They have no schisms of the identity. They have one identity. And imagine how peaceful that is. That's called a healthy ego, a healthy identity. That's when one can actually be situated in oneself. Not when we have all these different identities and desires always competing for attention, right? So when we identify with something that is not ever going to be fixed in one place, like the body or mind, then we're inevitably going to be subject to like and dislike, popular, unpopular, happiness, distress, etc., over and over again, because we're categorically identifying with something that's always changing and subject to duality. So how can you be peaceful like that? How can you be peaceful if your identity changes every day? Let's say, to make a dramatic example, I'm going to be this new person today. And tomorrow I'm like a, Victoria's Secret model. Tomorrow I'm something else. Tomorrow I'm something else. Tomorrow I'm something else. Can I ever be happy? Never be peaceful? This is kind of what is oscillating through the material body and mind on a subtle level for us. And even if it's not so drastic, like what I'm painting a very a very dramatic example, obviously, for effect, but all the different competing dualities. Okay. So from Krishna's point of view, the changing of bodies is just as inconsequential as the change of clothes. And actually, some of the yogis, they saw that actually this change of clothes is favorable. It's nice. Like you get a nice young body again, and you get a, like, I'm sure, once I get old, I'll be like, man, I wish I had my 20-year-old body. That would be nice, right? So in one sense, they saw, oh, no worries if you have to take another body, you get a nice fresh one, right? It's like washing the laundry. It's like, that's one of my favorite feelings. It's like a weird thing that I have, but I love just everything to be clean. Just my whole house and my clothes and just everything folded in its place. And it's like, ah. So it's like that feeling of like, I'm in a new body, So the yogis saw it like that in one sense. Anything else I want to say? So anyways, just kind of going back to the beginning ignorance that he's experiencing is that he's lamenting all about the material bodies of his relatives that are hell-bent on war, and that inevitably Dharma is asking him to step up and protect the innocent and protect truth. And as part of that, and being the nature of a warrior, he has to defend the innocent. And to do that, he has to use violence. And to do that, he has to end the material body of people that he's relating with, okay, in order to protect. Right. So our Krishna is kind of dispelling all these different ignorances. You can't actually kill. You can never be killed. No one can slay. No one can be slain. He's giving all these different basic elementary ABCs of spiritual life. Let's read the last few verses, then we can end. Okay. So 26 to 30. If, however, you think that the soul or the symptoms of life will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in the interim state, and unmanifested again when annihilated. So you think the cheesecake, right? So what need is there for lamentation, right? So some look on the soul as amazing, some describe the soul as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. O descendant of Bharat, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any living being. Very powerful. Very powerful. I think about that regularly. The world is not in need of more, hospitals or charities, or the world is in need of more saints who can actually be neutral to the world of duality. True saints who can be fixed in truth and who can be an actual friend to all, because they're not controlled by lust and anger and greed and jealousy and envy, and they can actually be your well-wisher. It's very rare to find a well-wisher with no motive other than to just serve you in your highest potential. There's always something. There's just the family bond, or, I, me, mine. That's the whole thing we spoke about before, right? I love you because I get things from you. I like you because you please me. And those who don't please me, I call them enemy. But it's just like, oh, you have the same flavors of sattva, rajas, tamas, of ignorance as me? Oh, cool, we could be friends. You have different flavor of ignorance that rubs mine the wrong way? Enemy. So it's very rare to actually find somebody who can hold your soul and take you on a journey home and care for you beyond I, me, mine, what's in it for me, or you're just in relation to me, therefore I care for you, or I possess you in some way. who has none of that. That is what we actually need. That's what we actually need. So these are very powerful verses. There's also one very beautiful point, and it's kind of subtle here. We'll end with maybe one or two small points and then any questions. So this verse 26, it says, even if you think that the soul is continually born and always dies, you shouldn't lament. So basically this is, even if you think the body, so here's two arguments. Either you're spiritual or you're material. If you're spiritual, the soul's everlasting and it can't be killed, right? And if you're material, then what is the loss? Because here's an example. If you go, let's say like you go visit a laboratory and someone's, in their biology 1 class or chemistry 1 class in college, and you walk in to the lab and they have all their beakers and different, chemicals and liquids that they're using and ammonium nitrate, all, different solvents. And I had to go through all these things and go through organic chemistry and make aspirin and like it's all flashing back to me now. But imagine going and you see someone just crying as they pour out the beaker. Like it's like, a solvent. And then the water, H2O. Ooh, and then the other things, right? So if the body is just chemicals and just material elements, why lament? Right? Like we do this stuff all the time. If it's literally just material particles and there's no inherent value beyond beyond that, what is matter's neither created nor destroyed either. And your body just goes back to the earth, all the carbon, all the nitrogen, all of it remains. So why? There's no need to lament about that either. So whether one thinks materially or spiritually, there's no necessity for lamentation over the loss of the body. Okay, then last thing here. So the verse 29, I really like this meditation, that some realize the soul with amazement, some speak of it in amazement, another hear about it in amazement, and some see it and hear it and still don't even know it. They still don't realize it. I really like this because for me, and this is something I'm really excited to dive into deeply in the next few months in my life, is completely going on a prayer journey in my life, a deep prayer journey in my life. And I'm really excited about this. Why this verse makes me think of that is because actually there is an amazement to life, and there's an amazement to the soul. Like, if you just start looking closely, you will be amazed everywhere you look. Right? Originally, science was, because Christians were, the modern science that we have now, is because Christians were amazed at God. And they said, God is great. But they wanted to show everyone how great God was. And so they started to look to the stars and started to look to the plants and under the microscopes. And they started to discover and see how great actually God was. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of the banyan seed. I was just at a banyan tree in Colombia. It was probably 400 years old. This massive banyan tree. Massive banyan tree. And it comes from this little seed. So within this seed, there's the intelligence for this massive 400-year-old banyan tree to grow. All the information is right here in this tiny little thing. Everything for it to perfectly do its thousands of functions, millions of functions. I remember when I was living as a monk and studying biology, and I was learning photosynthesis in very great detail. And I thought, how amazing to turn light into sugar. What? Can you turn light into sugar? Try. Can try, right? But all the information is there. And not only that, but all the information is there to grow the banyan tree, and for that banyan tree to drop thousands of seeds that can grow more banyan trees. And this is how all of life is going forward. And so when we look at the microbe, the banyan, the stars, there's billions and trillions of infinite living entities. And we just kind of glaze it over. Oh, just a normal day, go to work, drink my matcha latte, stretch for a few minutes on my yoga mat, listen to some, I don't know. Anyways, got to stop being goofy. But some hear about all these things, but they're so engrossed in mundane material consciousness that nothing is amazing. Everything is mundane. And that is sad. That's a sad reality to live in, where everything is mundane. Everything is pointless. Everything's just what it is. An ant is an ant. I told someone once, oh, you don't believe these stories in the Vedas? There's of course, a lot of crazy stories. And, I'm not saying I fully have 100% faith that and all these crazy far out stories too. But I said, what if I told you, I have to pause for 5 seconds to get this right. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Okay. What if I told you, I know someone who can lift 5,000 times their body weight? Well, what'd you tell me? I know someone. Thinking this Yamuna guy, he's tricky. Okay, Krishna, that's a cop out. Of course, Krishna. Everything rests on just his pinky finger. Gives a good answer though. You got me beat. But what if I told you it's not Krishna? It's not any superpower spiritual being. An ant. An ant can lift up to 5,000 times its body weight. And these things are happening everywhere. And yet we're not amazed. Is no God. Everything is proof of God. I had some crazy fruits in Colombia. That was proof of God for me. I was like, how'd you invent this shiz? You took this candy, you put it on a tree, candy on a tree. Who could think of that one? I was like, Krishna is amazing. You put candy on a tree, just put all different thousands of times, sprinkled in the jungle. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool guy. That's amazing. Anyway, so if we're just a little honest, honesty leads to theism, ultimately. Honesty leads to theism. Gratitude also ultimately leads to theism. Any questions, any reflections, anything you liked from today? Anything else? I'm with my friend Ananda in Michigan today. I just arrived here last night after flying 14 hours, 14-hour journey. So I'm recovering a little, but I'm grateful. And Ananda and I are leading an India pilgrimage in January. And I posted about it. There's people here coming. Claire's coming, and another woman who's not here today, Lisa, she's coming. And anybody here who wants to come with us to India and get to meet my gurus and go on an epic adventure with Krishna. You don't have to be part of my faith, but you can come with us as a pilgrim. And I just want to throw that out there to this group that you can raise your hand if you want to talk about it, and then I'll message you if anybody wants to. Okay, Sherry. Okay, really cool. Okay, cool. So anyways, I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but if you want, you can message me, can talk about it. Any questions, any reflections? Yeah, Claire.
Yeah, I love so much about like these verses, and the part when, like, right as you said, there's such a sense of like such a solace in like this, like, I always exist. It's unmovable, unchangeable. Like there is, I like my part of my meditation is coming back to that space of it's eternal. Like, what am I worrying about? And then this sense of wonder about the world, and like just being, I can find myself in a trance just looking at water for hours, and it's just like it never ceases to like completely blow my mind, you know.
Yeah.
And like, for example, I have an anatomy book by my bed, and every once in a while I'll just open it up and I'll look at like the anatomy of the human body, and like just all the bits, like just what we are comprised of, like this machine. It just like it's like it completely mind-blowing. And then we,
Yeah.
you know, like you said, like we live in, there's this sort of malaise of like monotony and just mundaneness. That's even a word. And you're like, but can't you see like what's going on around you? You know,
Yeah.
I have this thing with my parents a lot because they're sort of in the, like, bless them, I adore them, I love them, but they're sort of in like the CNN sort of coma a lot of the time. And I like, and it's not a judgment, it's just like an observation, you know? And so I try to, and I just kind of reflect on like what that's like. And then I look outside. Like there's just so many different worlds colliding all the time. And just to kind of sit back and see it as it's happening and be like, it's incredible that we're here.
Absolutely. Hallelujah. You said it. Yeah, there's a few things to tease out more on what you said. One is there's actually no fear in reality. If one's situated in reality, there cannot categorically be fear. There cannot actually be fear if one is situated in reality. The second is many people seek sensation more than becoming sensitive to reality. Like this is it's not a fully formed thought, but what I think is people like to pretty much bombard the senses, and in that way they become numb, rather than one who goes inward to refine the facilities of the mind and the senses and the intellect. Then one can actually relish much deeper reality and can become sensitive to the amazement and the enjoyment of reality and the nature of reality, which is, you know, permeated by Krishna. It's permeated by Krishna's energy. It's divine energy. And so just as one of my friends gives this example, but has anyone ever had peanut sauce? So if you've ever had peanut sauce, then everything in that peanut sauce is permeated by a peanutness, right? Everything that is in that peanut sauce is permeated by peanutness. So just in the same way, that original like peanut is Krishna. And Krishna, you can know Krishna in full, or you can know him in his pervasive, all permeating form that is within nature and within reality and within the cosmos. And because of that, everywhere you look, there is the peanutness. There is the Krishna-ness of reality, the divineness of reality, because it is permeating from that original divine. So one just has to become a little introspective. Anybody else have anything to share? Saika, yeah.
I would like to say something.
Oh, sure. Martha, you can go, and then Saika, please.
Go. The one thing I'm sorry, you go. About the one identity and the healthy ego. I find that so hard.
Mhm.
You know, we are what we say we are, and we are searching for what we're searching, and that those two things, this is my perception, those two things keep going together. I see that it's so hard to imagine not being the mother and the wife and the artist and everything I'm being up to now, even though I know what I do want to be and what I would like to get on this path next to these identities. So the one identity and the healthy ego sounds beautiful, but honestly, I don't know, I don't want to sound negative. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. I think there can be a healthy distinction between a role that we play and an identity that we have. I don't know if that's a fully logical statement, but what I mean to say is I believe that we can be situated in our identity and still play particular roles within this world. It does not mean having no role or no relation, because everyone's going to relate in different ways. It's inevitable. We're going to have different relations. And in the spiritual world, it's actually the epitome when we look, and this is, maybe for deeper classes or other classes, but when we look at the spiritual existence, it's permeated by family life. It is village life, it is family life. Krishna has his mother and father, and there's an enjoyment to that variety of relation.
Mm.
But it's just when we forget the truth of our primary identity that becomes a problem, and we let the secondary identities overtake us and cause a forgetfulness of ourselves. It's not that the secondary isn't true or that we should throw it away and not relate with anyone. That's not our philosophy, but it's that we should awaken that primary identity while acting in this world. And it's actually the only way to truly be a well-wisher of everyone. Or
Yeah, I
else
like that
everything's
word.
motivated, everything's self-motivated, everything's tinged with duality.
I like that word that you just said, awakening, because it's there. It's always been there.
It's always there.
Yes.
One has to awaken. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Saika?
Yes. So I've been in my finding my authentic self journey. It's been very quite a few months, and the verses that I'm reading is very difficult because I understand where Arjuna is coming from. And right now it's been such a big journey to really love myself, understand my body, be gratitude for what I have. It's been a huge journey for me, and really loving myself, respecting myself. And there becomes an attachment because we are reading this, and we come from a belief that there is soul and reincarnations, and I finally feel that I'm connected to my soul. I'm so gratitude towards where it's guiding me. But there's a but. And so when we hear this, because now you're not attached, but you're aware that, hey, like you need to detach from this, because you need to kind of see this journey through, what your soul learns, what is guiding you. And with this, like I feel like I'm with Arjuna here, trying to understand. And I know that there is ignorance, and there's ego, and there's roles. But when Krishna explains him, I feel like I understand. But I just came to understand my body. I just came to really love myself, and it has taken such a big thing. So that's something that's I'm kind of like really trying to, I can't let go, but at the same time I'm there. I do understand. So yeah,
I
that's
think there's a few things happening right now for you. And you're reminding me of a really, really great book I read, one of my favorite books of all time. It's called Falling Upwards. I don't know if any of you have ever read Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan monk. And what you're reminding me of is he talks about the two halves of life, spirituality for the two halves of life. And it's also a similar concept within the Vedas, but we don't see it in our particular Vaishnava text because our Vaishnava Bhakti texts are purely focused on the soul. So we don't see a lot of the human advice that is given in the rest of the Vedas, that's given in Ayurveda, given in many other sciences, given in the Dharma Shastras. This is how to act, this is how to have a healthy ego, sense of self in a material sense. We don't have that in our spiritual text because we're very zoomed in on the self-realization thing. And it was assumed that you already had a decent sense of self, right? And it, anyways, bhakti is independent of all this. Bhakti is independent of you having the right job. Bhakti is independent of you having a good material body or one that you don't like, or a good mind, or a mind that's messed up. Bhakti is a more powerful energy than any of those things. But what I want to say from Richard Rohr's book is that he considers the first half of life like building that human identity. This is who I am. These are my relationships. This is what I offer to the world. This is, my tribe. This is my people. This is how I move through the world. And he considers that like the container, building the container. And many people spend their whole life trying to make this container, first of all, but then they spend a lot of their life also repairing all these leaks in the container, all these broken cuts in their container of their humanness. But they never look at the second half of life, which is what you're actually supposed to fill the container with, which is your spiritual life, right? You have to have a good container in one sense, a healthy ego, so that you can actually fill that ego with good things. Like that's what contentment means. It means the contents. What are you filling? What are you filling your life with? But you have to have a decent container for that to, at least that's his argument in Falling Upwards. And it's a very powerful idea. So it's not that we have to give up having a healthy body and healthy mind and healthy ego to be spiritual, but rather at its pinnacle, it is the I guess I want to say it's the pinnacle of it. It's the highest expression of health when we're connected with the soul. Even in Ayurveda, there's so many deep concepts in there, turning away from the self as their or original disease. And from that, all respecting the body, disrespecting the senses, all that. You guys all froze again. Hopefully you're still there. Okay, you're still here. Let me see you guys. Does that make sense, Saika? Like it's not that we shouldn't build the container for life, but it's that we shouldn't forget to fill it.
Right.
And the other thing I want to say is that we have to build something so that we actually have something to surrender. If you have nothing substantial that you've actually built, there's nothing to surrender, right? Like it's very popular in our bhakti movement. There's all these young kind of fired up men, and they're like 16, 17, 18, whatever, joining the ashram. And they're like, look at how renounced. But I'm like, what did you give up to be here? You just got out of high school? Did you have like some deep thing that you gave up? You didn't build anything. You didn't build anything very big to give up. And so it's not that we're not supposed to build anything, but that we're supposed to have that mood of surrender. And that actually real surrender is when we have something of real substance and we give it all. Does that make sense? It was a little bit of a scattered thought, but Falling Upwards is a really great book. It's Two Halves of Life. It's one of my favorites. Okay, anyone, one last comment, one last question, then we'll log off. If you have to go, you can go, but anyone, one last thing? Okay. Thank you guys for going over time. Hope you had a nice class, and we will continue from verse 31 onward next Thursday. All right. Love you guys. Have a beautiful week. Anyone who wants to just even explore what India pilgrimage would be like, just message me. We'd love to talk to you about it. And talk to you guys Thursday. Hariom Tat Sat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank